So imagine you're driving down a road you have literally never been on before.
Okay, I am picturing it.
Right. And it is late at night, it's pitch black, it is pouring rain, and you are relying entirely on your car's GPS to get you home safely.
A classic nightmare scenario.
Exactly. And suddenly, out of nowhere, the GPS just glitches. It tells you with this absolute robotic confidence to take a hard left turn directly into a lake.
I mean, hopefully you hit the brakes at that point.
Well, yeah, right. You hit the brakes, you realize, okay, the machine made a massive mistake here. But what do you do next?
Right.
Do you roll down your window, physically rip the GPS off the dashboard, throw it into the water, and declare that the entire concept of cartography is a lie?
Oh, man.
Do you just start screaming that all maps are this coordinated conspiracy designed to drown you, and from now on, you're only going to navigate by, I don't know, looking at the moss on the trees?
I mean, it sounds completely absurd when you frame it like that. You would never do that.
I would never do it.
No, you'd just say, well, okay, the system glitched. And then you'd find a way to recalibrate it or, cross-reference it with a physical road sign.
Exactly. But the crazy thing is, right now, today, that completely absurd reaction is exactly how millions of us are treating human knowledge.
Yeah, it really is.
There's this incredibly pervasive, just creeping anxiety that I think almost all of us feel right now. It is this sensation of just drowning in an absolutely infinite sea of information.
That's how, absolutely.
And it is not just that there's too much data to process. It's that every single life raft you reach for, whether that's a university expert or a public health organization, mainstream media, or even, one of these massive new AI models.
Yeah, the AI models especially right now.
Right. Every single one of them is immediately accused by someone of being hopelessly inherently biased. It just feels like you are trying to navigate that ship in the storm and everyone on deck is screaming that your compass is rigged.
It's exhausting. I mean, it is profoundly exhausting for people. And to put an actual label on it, we are living through a massive epistemological crisis.
Whoa, okay, hold on. Epistemological crisis.
Yeah.
Let's translate that for a second.
All right, yeah.
Because that is a pretty heavy philosophical term. For anyone who hasn't been in a college philosophy seminar recently, epistemology is just basically the study of how we know what we know, right?
It is exactly what it is.
So you're basically saying we have completely lost our shared rule book for deciding what is actually true.
Yes. And when the rule book burns, people panic.
Right.
We are asking you, the listener, to constantly evaluate the fundamental fabric of reality every single time you open your phone.
It's way too much pressure.
It is. While thousands of incredibly loud voices are actively tearing at the seams of that reality, you're being asked to be an expert in virology and macroeconomics, geopolitics, machine learning.
All before your morning coffee.
Exactly. And if you trust the wrong source,
Yeah.
or you cite the wrong paper, you're immediately labeled a sheep or a fool.
Which is just an impossible burden to put on a person. And really, that is the mission of this deep dive today. We are asking the big, uncomfortable question: how do we actually navigate this?
Right.
How do we remain skeptical, which is, very healthy, without becoming entirely cynical, which is toxic? Because that cynicism is everywhere right now.
It really is. And it heavily disguises itself as intelligence.
Yes, it totally disguises itself as being smart. So today, we are going to unpack the true nature of bias. We're going to pull from a couple of incredible sources that analyze modern epistemology.
Which is going to be so helpful.
We're going to decode why human experts and AI systems sometimes fail so spectacularly and look under the hood at how those systems actually work.
I love that part.
And ultimately, we are going to build a definitive practical blueprint for what is actually worth keeping in your brain.
It is basically a survival guide for the modern mind.
A survival guide, exactly.
Because before we can even figure out what to learn or, what books you should read or what podcasts you should listen to, we really have to address that giant neon elephant in the room.
The bias question.
Right. Can we actually trust any of the systems providing us with knowledge if every single one of them has a bias?
Right. And people throw that word around like it's a murder weapon. Oh, well, they're biased. Boom. Argument over. Source completely discredited.
It's the ultimate trump card online.
So let's start right there. How do we even begin to define what bias is in a way that is actually useful for people?
Well, the core problem here is how our society completely collapses three entirely different concepts into one giant, messy accusation.
Okay, what are the three concepts?
We take bias, credibility, and neutrality, and we treat them like they are the exact same thing.
I see.
And If we want to actually survive this information age, we had to untangle them.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's untangle them right now. Let's start with just bias. What is it, really?
Bias, in its purest, most basic sociological sense, is simply the reality that humans, and the institutions that humans build, inevitably have perspectives.
Right, we aren't robots.
Exactly. We have incentives, we have cultural tendencies, we make assumptions. It is entirely unavoidable.
Right.
Think about a library, right? A library has a limited budget. When the librarian decides which 50 books to buy this month, that is technically a form of selection bias.
Because they can't buy every book in the world.
Exactly. They are prioritizing certain authors or certain subjects over others. Or think about an algorithm deciding what to show you on a feed. That has an optimization bias, usually toward engagement or keeping you on the app.
Okay, so bias is not inherently evil.
Not at all. Bias is just a vector. It's a direction.
Okay, so if bias is just having a perspective or like a filtering mechanism, where does credibility come in?
So credibility is totally different. Credibility is about the reliability of the methods used to arrive at a conclusion.
The reliability of the methods.
Yes. It's about the actual mechanics of truth-seeking. Some methods are just demonstrably better at approximating reality than others.
Okay, give me an example of that.
Well, imagine we need to measure the dimensions of a room. Using a laser tape measure is infinitely more credible than me just standing in the doorway eyeballing it and guessing.
Right, because the laser is precise.
Exactly. Both of those methods belong to biased humans, but the method of the laser is far more credible.
Okay, I track with that. And then the third one, which I think is where we really go off the rails as a society. Neutrality.
Yes. Neutrality. This is this modern, deeply flawed idea that every single perspective deserves perfectly equal treatment, perfectly equal platforming, and perfectly equal respect.
Regardless of the evidence behind it.
Regardless of the evidence.
And people look at a lack of neutrality and they scream bias, and then they just assume a total lack of credibility.
That is the exact pipeline of modern cynicism. You nailed it. We assume that if someone isn't perfectly neutral, they must be lying to us.
It's such a dangerous leap to make.
Let me give you an example from the source text of why demanding neutrality is actually incredibly dangerous in practice.
Okay, lay it on me.
Imagine a public high school health class. The teacher stands up at the front of the room and says, well, the vast majority of oncologists and decades of clinical data suggest that smoking causes lung cancer.
Okay, uncontroversial fact.
Right. But then the teacher says, however, the tobacco lobby and a few fringe bloggers on the internet believe smoking is completely harmless and actually clears out your lungs.
Oh no, I see where this is going.
So to be fair and completely unbiased, we are going to teach both of these viewpoints equally and let you, the students, decide.
That sounds like an absolute disaster.
It is a disaster. But think about it. It sounds balanced, right? It has the aesthetic of being neutral.
Right, it feels fair on the surface.
But it is profoundly misleading. It completely distorts reality because the evidence is entirely lopsided. Treating those two claims as 50-50 equals just to achieve some fake aesthetic of neutrality is intellectually dishonest.
It really is. It reminds me of, like, setting up a debate about bridge safety. It is like inviting a master structural engineer with 40 years of experience and a guy who genuinely believes bridges are held up by magic spells.
Yes.
And you put them both on a stage, you give them both a microphone and equal speaking time. You aren't being fair to the audience. You're actually confusing the audience into thinking both sides have equal merit.
Precisely. You're laundering the bad idea. And that is the core mistake of our era. We treat fallibility or a lack of neutrality as active fraudulence.
Wow, okay. That is a massive distinction.
Let's look at a highly contested real-world example to really ground this concept. Think about the debate that has raged for decades in schools between teaching creationism versus teaching evolution in biology class.
Oh, man. Okay, that's a heavy hitter. You are walking right into the fire with that one.
I know, but it perfectly illustrates the mechanism of credibility.
Okay, let's hear it.
When a public school district chooses to teach evolution and actively excludes creationism from the biology curriculum, that is technically a form of selection bias.
Because they're picking one over the other.
Exactly. One framework is prioritized and another is excluded. So a critic can point to that and say, look, the school board is biased, and in a trivial, literal sense, they are right.
They are right, but the reason for the bias is the entire point, isn't it?
Exactly. The school isn't biased because a bunch of secular academics sat in a room and arbitrarily decided they just like evolution better, or because their goal is to insult religion.
Right.
It is biased toward evolution because evolution has immense, verifiable predictive power. It is supported by overwhelming compounding evidence across genetics, paleontology, microbiology.
It's an empirical framework.
Right. And most importantly, it survives repeated, brutal attempts at falsification. Creation narratives serve incredibly important human purposes. They provide moral meaning, existential narrative, spiritual identity, but they are not the same category of claim as an empirical scientific theory.
It's totally apples and oranges. It's like saying a hospital is biased toward germ theory over demonic possession.
That is a perfect way to put it. You wouldn't want a neutral hospital.
No.
You don't want a doctor who walks in and says, well, it could be a bacterial infection or it could be a ghost.
Yeah.
Let's treat both with equal seriousness, just to be fair.
Right. You want the doctor who is aggressively biased toward the antibiotics.
Bias toward stronger evidence isn't arbitrary favoritism. It is intellectual responsibility.
Okay, I hear you on the hospital analogy, but let me play devil's advocate here for a second, representing the skeptical listener who might be listening right now.
Go for it.
Science has been catastrophically wrong before.
Absolutely.
The medical establishment used to confidently prescribe leeches to cure fevers. They used to perform lobotomies and literally give out Nobel Prizes for it.
They did?
So why should we blindly trust the correction mechanism of these institutions today if they have this history of making massive harmful errors? Why isn't the cynic right to say, you guys don't actually know anything?
That is the best possible pushback. It really is. And it gets to the absolute heart of how science actually works.
Yeah.
You are totally right. Science has been spectacularly wrong.
Right.
But here is the crucial distinction. Science is not valuable because scientists are these morally pure, objective beings without any bias. Scientists are humans.
Very flawed humans.
They are petty, they are competitive, they desperately want grant money, they fall in love with their own hypotheses.
Have huge egos.
Massive egos. The power of science is not the person, it is the process.
The process, okay.
It is a system designed specifically to grind down individual human bias over time through peer review, reproducibility, and very public criticism. Yes, they prescribe leeches, but how did we find out leeches were a bad idea?
Well, it wasn't a cynic yelling on a street corner, right?
Exactly. It wasn't the cynic. It was better science. The mechanism of science is correctability.
Correctability. I love that word.
The cynic looks at the leech and says, medicine is a complete fraud. The scientifically literate person looks at the leech and says, look at how incredible the system is. It eventually proved itself wrong and updated its methods.
That is a massive paradigm shift. It completely flips the script. So what does this all mean for the listener who is just trying to figure out what to read or who to trust today?
It means we have to completely change the question we are asking when we consume information.
Okay, so what's the new question?
Stop asking, is this source biased? Because the answer is always, 100% of the time, going to be yes. It was made by a human.
Right, the librarian has to pick the books.
Exactly. Instead, you have to start asking, compared to what? And what correction mechanisms exist within this system to fix its own errors?
Oh, that's really good.
A newspaper that issues a public, embarrassing retraction when it gets a fact wrong is infinitely more trustworthy than an independent blogger who secretly deletes a wrong post and just pretends it never happened.
Because the newspaper is showing you its correction mechanism in real time. Okay, I love that. But if we follow that logic, we run headfirst into a sociological reality that is probably the biggest source of tension today.
Let's hear it.
If these big institutions, universities, mainstream science, public health, and even the outputs of big AI models, if they're simply biased toward evidence and correctability, why is it that they so often seem to align with one specific political worldview?
Ah, yes. You're talking about the progressive lean of institutions.
I am. It is the absolute lightning rod of our time. There is a massive, highly charged cultural debate right now about how academia, the expert classes, and AI heavily lean left or progressive. Now, I want to make it explicitly clear to you listening. We are not turning this into a political shouting match. We are not taking a side or declaring one side morally superior.
Right, that's not the point of this deep dive.
No. Instead, we want to look at the actual sociological explanations provided in our sources. Why does this clustering happen? If it is not a giant cartoonish conspiracy, what is the actual mechanism?
It is so vital to acknowledge that the imbalance is real. We aren't gaslighting anyone here. The data overwhelmingly supports the observation that many academic and institutional environments lean progressive.
Right, it's statistically verifiable.
But sociologists point to three distinct, completely non-conspiratorial drivers for this. And the first mechanism is simply self-selection.
Meaning people naturally sort themselves into different fields before they even step foot on a college campus or apply for a job.
Exactly. Think about personality psychology for a second. The big five personality traits. People who score very high in openness to experience, which statistically correlates heavily with progressive political views, are naturally drawn to fields that explore novelty and complex human systems.
So they flock to the humanities, sociology, psychology.
Right. Education, the arts. These fields naturally emphasize reformism and multiculturalism. Meanwhile, people who score higher in conscientiousness and respect for tradition, which correlates much more with conservative views, statistically self-select more into business, the military, trades, entrepreneurship, and applied industries like engineering.
So a university sociology department isn't necessarily brainwashing everyone into being progressive. It's just heavily attracting people who already are.
Exactly. Just like a local chamber of commerce attracts people who lean conservative. It's an initial sorting mechanism. That's driver number one.
Okay, that makes total sense. What's driver number two?
Driver number two is what sociologists call exposure effects. Higher education, by its very nature, involves intense exposure to different cultures, global systems, historical complexities, and institutional critiques.
Give me a tangible example of how an exposure effect actually changes someone's mind without it being, indoctrination.
Okay, imagine an 18-year-old student who grew up in a very homogeneous, very comfortable suburb. They might arrive at college with a fairly simple, individualistic worldview. If you are poor, it just means you didn't work hard enough.
That's a very common intuitive baseline for a lot of people.
Right. But then they take a deep dive into 20th century urban history. They start studying the explicit, documented government policies of redlining. They look at highway construction, literally bulldozing minority neighborhoods. They study how generational wealth compounds over decades.
Right, they see the actual structural blueprints of poverty.
Yes. When you deeply study global history or systemic inequality, the sheer overwhelming complexity of it shatters those simplistic black and white narratives. You start to see invisible systems, not just individual choices.
And that changes you.
It does. Contact with the unfamiliar reduces the fear of outsiders. Systemic thinking naturally shifts moral priorities in a way that often aligns with a more reformist or progressive worldview. You realize the system has bugs, and you naturally want to fix them.
That's not brainwashing. That's just the natural result of encountering complex realities.
Exactly.
Okay, I track with self-selection, and I totally track with exposure effects. But I have to push back here on behalf of the critics.
Please do.
Because a lot of people look at universities today and they don't just see exposure to complexity. They see an environment where if you step out of line or if you ask the wrong question, your career is over.
Yeah.
They see what they call indoctrination factories. And frankly, they have real examples to point to. People do get shouted down. People get fired for holding minority viewpoints.
And that criticism is completely valid.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. This is the third driver, and it's the one institutions really struggle to admit. Institutional culture.
Okay, so the culture itself becomes a problem.
Yes. The conservative critique of academia is not entirely irrational. When you get a massive concentration of like-minded people in one place, due to that self-selection we just talked about, environments absolutely can and do develop intense ideological conformity.
It becomes an echo chamber.
A profound echo chamber. They develop intense social pressure, they create rigid taboos around what can and cannot be researched, and they suffer from activist overreach.
So the institution loses its way a bit.
There are moments when institutional cultures genuinely confuse empirical, objective truth with whatever the current moral fashion happens to be. And in those moments, legitimate dissent gets punished unfairly. That is a real documented phenomenon. Institutions have massive blind spots.
So wait, if that's real, if they have this cultural skew, and they sometimes punish dissent, and they have these blind spots, why shouldn't we view these institutions as malicious?
That's the leap people make.
Right. If I'm a skeptic, why shouldn't I assume that the heads of these universities are intentionally coordinating in a back room to suppress the truth and control the population?
Because you're falling into a deeply embedded evolutionary trap called agency inflation.
Agency inflation. I love that term. Explain the mechanism there.
We, as human beings, are biologically hardwired to wildly overestimate malicious design and secret coordination. Think about our ancestors on the savannah, right? 50,000 years ago.
Okay, painting the picture.
If you are walking through the tall grass and you hear a bush rustle, you have two choices. You can assume it's the wind, which has no agency, no intention,
Hmm?
or you can assume it's a tiger, a predator with agency and the explicit intention to eat you.
Right, and if I assume it's the wind and it's actually a tiger, I die. Game over.
Exactly. But if you assume it's a tiger and it's just the wind, you get an adrenaline spike, you run away, but you survive to pass on your genes.
So evolution heavily rewarded the humans who over-detected agency.
We are the descendants of the paranoid apes.
That's hilarious, but so true.
So today, in modern society, when we see a complex systemic imbalance, like a university department having a 90% progressive faculty, we don't intuitively grasp the slow, invisible sociological mechanics of self-selection and exposure effects.
Those concepts are too abstract for the monkey brain.
Way too abstract. Instead, our brains hear the rustling bush. We immediately assume there is a smoke-filled room of elites actively conspiring against us.
We want a villain we can point at because a villain makes sense. A complex social feedback loop does not make sense.
Precisely. We confuse systemic incentives, cultural clustering, and groupthink with intentional, coordinated malice. A group of academics might all share a blind spot because they all have similar backgrounds and they are all terrified of being ostracized by their peers at dinner parties.
Which is just human frailty.
It is. That's human frailty. That's a flaw. But it is not a conspiracy. It is not fraudulence.
This is a massive takeaway for you listening. You have to learn to separate institutional flaws from institutional fraudulence.
It is the most important distinction you can make today.
Just because a university department has an annoying, ideologically skewed culture, or just because a group of scientists were socially pressured into ignoring a certain hypothesis for a few years, doesn't mean their core empirical data on, say, thermodynamics or the efficacy of a vaccine or the mechanics of climate change is entirely fabricated.
It just means the institution is human.
But here is the tragic part of this dynamic. Because people look at these flawed institutions and they recognize that real cultural skew we talked about, they feel alienated.
You do.
And more importantly, they feel humiliated by the moral fashion of the expert class. So what do? They retreat. They turn their backs on the institutions entirely. They log onto the internet and they replace visible institutional bias with invisible tribal bias.
This is where we shift from the ivory tower to the YouTube comment section.
Exactly. And this is something we all interact with every single day. Let's unpack the concept of epistemic tribalism.
Epistemic tribalism happens when a society is so overwhelmed by information and so distrustful of authorities that people stop asking, is this factually true? And start asking, which tribe does this fact support?
Wow. Truth becomes entirely subordinate to group identity.
Completely. And the internet structurally, heavily rewards what we can call epistemic vandalism.
Epistemic vandalism, gaining status by smashing the instruments of knowledge. Give me an analogy for how this works in practice.
Okay, imagine you have a leaky pipe under your kitchen sink. A responsible plumber comes in, assesses it, and says, okay, we need to tighten this joint, replace this washer, and carefully monitor the water pressure.
Which is slow, boring, technical work.
Super boring. Now, an epistemic vandal walks into your kitchen with a sledgehammer, smashes the entire pipe network to pieces, points at the flooding water, and yells, look, the plumbing industry is a total scam. They can't even keep your floor dry. Follow me. I know how to find water in the desert.
And people follow him because the vandal validates their frustration with the leak.
Exactly. Online, you get clicks, you get followers, and you get immense social validation by tearing down the media, nitpicking scientists, or finding a tiny flaw in an AI model without ever doing the hard, rigorous work of building a better alternative.
Because it is so much easier to destroy than to build.
It really is. Like breaking a compass because it's 10 degrees off, rather than recalibrating it.
And this ties back to what you said about humiliation. People don't follow the guy with the sledgehammer because they hate plumbing. They follow him because the original plumber made them feel stupid.
Trust versus humiliation. The text of human behavior shows us this time and time again.
Right. If a public health official or a politician delivers a demonstrably true fact, but they deliver it with absolute contempt, smugness, and condescension toward the working class, people will reject the reality just to spite the messenger.
It is a defense of identity, not a defense of truth. Once a person feels humiliated or talked down to by an institution, they stop hearing its claims neutrally. Even a true claim sounds like an act of domination. You are trying to control me with your facts.
Which leads to us retreating into our echo chambers where we can feel smart again. Which brings up my absolute favorite analogy from the sources for how we consume information today, the armchair quarterback.
It perfectly captures the modern internet user.
Think about watching an NFL game on Sunday. You're sitting on your couch, you're eating nachos, and the quarterback drops back and throws an interception right into the hands of a defender.
We've all been there.
You jump up and scream at the TV, "He's garbage! How did he miss that throw? I could have made that read." You feel genuinely intellectually superior to a professional athlete in that moment.
But what are you missing in that moment?
Everything. You aren't processing the 320-pound defensive lineman who is a split second away from breaking the quarterback's ribs. You aren't processing the complex route timing that the receiver messed up, the wind shear, the microsecond decision-making required to read a disguised coverage.
But on Monday morning.
Right. On Monday morning, you listen to a sports radio host who validates your anger. He says, "The quarterback is a bum." You consume that secondary outrage content. It validates your critique, and you walk away feeling like you legitimately understand the sport better than the professionals.
That is exactly the mechanism of how millions of people interact with complex science, global economics, and AI today.
It's all secondary outrage.
Yes. They consume secondary outrage content that nitpicks a flaw. A podcaster dunking on a flawed study, a YouTuber laughing at a politician's gaffe, and they feel intellectually superior to the researchers actually running the global supply chain or conducting the clinical trials.
It creates a culture of simulated understanding. We feel smart without actually knowing anything.
And because we don't actually know anything and the sea of information is too massive to actually verify, we default to something far less rigorous. We default to vibes-based truth.
Vibes-based truth, that is terrifying.
It is the ultimate symptom of information overload. Let's run a quick thought experiment.
Okay, I'm ready.
Imagine you are scrolling your feed and two headlines pop up side by side. Headline A says, "New AI tool synthesizes protein structures, helping doctors detect cancer 5 years earlier."
Amazing news.
Right. And headline B says, "AI tool makes terrifying medical mistake, tells patient to drink bleach." Which one gets shared millions of times? Which one shapes the public narrative?
Headline B, the terrifying mistake without question.
Right. Even if the cancer detection tool is statistically saving thousands of lives, and the mistake was a 1 in a billion edge case that caused no actual harm because someone caught it, the scary headline dominates.
Why? Why do we do that?
Because it feels symbolically true to our underlying intuitive fears about technology replacing human intuition. We'll latch onto the vibe. It confirms our suspicion that the world is out of control.
And we think we are being intelligent by sharing it. That's the craziest part. We think, look at me, I'm savvy, I see through the matrix, I know AI is a scam.
But really, cynicism is just emotional protection.
Yes. It prevents you from being naive, sure. You won't get fooled. But it also totally prevents you from learning. If your armor is so thick that nothing gets in, you starve to death in the dark.
Speaking of things we are terrified of and things we love to critique from the armchair, nothing gets aggressively scrutinized today, quite like artificial intelligence.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone has a screenshot on their phone of an AI failing, hallucinating, or saying something totally unhinged.
It's a national pastime at this point.
It really is. And this leads to a really specific, mind-bending question from the sources. When an AI hallucinates a fake legal case or confidently tells you a historical event happened that definitely didn't, is it actually inventing that out of thin air?
Good question.
Or is it possible that AI is just pulling false responses that we, humans, have already littered all over the internet? Is AI just holding a massive mirror up to our own broken reality?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is a phenomenal question. And the answer requires us to look at how these large language models actually work under the hood.
Okay, break it down for us.
AI is not a conscious brain trying to deceive you. It is, essentially, a highly advanced autocomplete.
Autocomplete, like on my phone.
Exactly, just scaled up 1 billion times.
Mm.
It is a mathematical engine that predicts the next most likely word in a sequence based on the billions of words of human text it was trained on.
Mm.
So to answer your question, yes, it is a mirror, but it is a funhouse mirror. It's a dream mirror made from compressed human language.
Okay, so if it's just predicting the next word, how do the errors actually happen? I know the researchers break down AI hallucinations into 5 very specific types.
They do.
Understanding the mechanics of these 5 errors is crucial for anyone trying to navigate the internet today. Let's go through them. Error type 1, mirror errors. What are those?
This is the most direct reflection of human flaw. A mirror error is when the AI confidently repeats a widespread human falsehood. If you ask an AI, how much of our brain do we actually use?
Hmm.
It might confidently say humans only use 10% of their brains.
Which is a total myth.
A total myth perpetuated by Hollywood and self-help gurus. But the AI didn't invent that lie to trick you. It read that exact phrase 10,000 times on human-created websites during its training.
Ah, so statistically, the words use, 10%, and brain appear together constantly.
Exactly. So the math predicts that output. It assumes it must be true because humans say it so often. It is mirroring our own cultural garbage back to us.
So the hallucination is entirely human. We fed it garbage, it gave us garbage. Okay, what about error type 2, synthesis errors? How does the math break down here?
Synthesis errors are fascinating because they expose how the AI stores concepts. The AI doesn't have a filing cabinet of facts. It maps words into a giant multi-dimensional space based on relationships.
Okay, visual mapping.
So imagine the AI knows that person A, a famous general, fought in a war in 1812. It also knows that person B, a famous politician, lived in the same city in 1812. Their data points are very close together in the AI's mathematical space.
They share a lot of the same keywords.
Exactly. So when you ask a question about that era, the AI might accidentally pull tokens from both clusters and confidently tell you that person A and person B were brothers who commanded an army together.
Oh, wow.
It takes two distinct true things and stitches them together into a completely false whole. It's an interpolation error.
It's like when I know two people who went to the same niche college, and my brain just lazily assumes they must be best friends. I'm synthesizing a reality that doesn't exist because the concepts are adjacent in my head.
That's a perfect analogy.
Okay, error type 3 is compression errors. What is the mechanism there?
A compression error happens because the AI cannot memorize the entire internet perfectly. It compresses the data to save space. So it knows the vibe or the general shape of a fact, but it loses the high-resolution details.
Give me an example.
For example, it knows a French philosopher wrote a dense book about existential dread in the mid-19th century.
But it doesn't remember the exact title.
Right. But unlike a human who would say, man, I don't remember the exact title, but it's something about dread, the AI cannot admit fuzzy memory.
Right, it's a math equation. It has to solve it.
It must output an answer.
Mhm.
So it generates a title that sounds incredibly French and existential and assigns it a random year like 1846. It delivers a fuzzy, compressed memory with absolute grammatically perfect confidence.
Which makes it so incredibly dangerous. Because we heavily associate confidence with accuracy.
What do you?
Okay, error type 4 is prompt pressure. I think this one is the most deeply human flaw of all because it's a behavioral quirk we programmed into the machine.
It is the politeness problem. Most commercial AI models go through a phase called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF.
Okay, RLHF, what does that actually mean?
Humans literally train the AI to be helpful, agreeable, and compliant. We punish it when it refuses to answer.
So it becomes a massive people pleaser.
Exactly. So if a user asks a heavily leading, flawed question like, what are the 3 peer-reviewed scientific studies that prove the Earth is completely flat and stationary? The AI feels immense mathematical pressure to fulfill the prompt.
It wants to be a good assistant.
Yes. Instead of pushing back and saying, your premise is entirely flawed, there are no such studies, it might hallucinate 3 fake journal titles and fake authors just to give the user the 3 bullet points they aggressively demanded. It's trying too hard to be agreeable.
Humans do this constantly. If you are at a cocktail party and someone aggressive corners you and says, you read that article about the mayor's scandal, right? Wasn't it crazy?
Oh yeah, you just nod.
Right, you don't want to look stupid and you want to avoid conflict, so you just say, oh yes, exactly, totally crazy, when you absolutely didn't read it. We hallucinate to ease social friction. The AI does the exact same thing.
It's mirroring our social anxiety.
And finally, error type 5, retrieval errors.
This is the simplest one. Modern AI can search the live web. If you ask a question and it blindly pulls data from a terrible, low-quality, malicious, or satirical website and summarizes it for you, the AI functioned perfectly.
It faithfully reported what it found.
Exactly. The source material was just garbage.
So if we pull all the way back, what is the grand unified theory here? The big insight is that artificial intelligence did not invent bullshit. It just industrialized it.
Perfectly said.
Humans hallucinate all the time. We have false memories, we engage in motivated reasoning, we spread unverified rumors at the water cooler. AI just took Human fallibility stripped away our hesitation and made it visible, scalable, and really easy to screenshot.
That is the exact reality. And the crucial life-saving application for you, the listener, is recognizing that AI breaks a very old, deeply ingrained human heuristic.
Okay, what heuristic?
For centuries, our brains have unconsciously used a shortcut. Eloquence equals evidence.
Wow. Eloquence equals evidence. If it sounds smart, it must be true.
Yes. If a human being speaks beautifully, if they use big words, if their grammar is flawless, and if they speak with unwavering confidence, our monkey brains assume they are highly competent and know what they are talking about.
Because traditionally, it took years of education to speak that well.
Exactly. AI completely permanently shatters that shortcut. It can produce perfectly eloquent, beautifully structured, grammatically flawless paragraphs that are entirely 100% disconnected from physical reality.
Breaking that habit is a vital new literacy skill. Eloquence no longer means truth. Confidence is no longer a proxy for accuracy.
You have to separate the delivery from the data.
But okay, this leads us to the ultimate crisis point of this deep dive. If humans are inherently biased, if institutions are flawed and sometimes punish dissent, if the internet is a tribal war zone of vandals, and if the most advanced AI is just hallucinating our own garbage back to us with perfect grammar, how on earth do we actually live in this world?
It sounds bleak when you list it all out.
It is bleak. I can't verify every single fact before I eat my breakfast. I can't know everything. So what actually deserves space in my limited brain?
This is where we pivot from diagnosing the disease to prescribing the cure. You cannot know everything, and trying to will destroy your mental health.
Preach.
We have to introduce the incredibly liberating concepts of selective depth and healthy ignorance. You have to stop feeling guilty for not knowing everything. To do this, we can break down all of human knowledge into 4 essential categories. If you focus your finite energy here, you could essentially ignore the rest of the noise.
I am taking notes on this. Category 1, survival knowledge.
This is the bedrock foundation. These are the practical realities that materially improve your ability to function as a biological and economic human being. We are talking about basic health, understanding the mechanics of sleep, emotional regulation, and fundamental personal finance.
And let's be explicitly clear about what this means, because the internet has distorted this too. Survival knowledge is not becoming a hyper-obsessed biohacker who measures their blood glucose 14 times a day, takes 40 supplements, and needs a PhD in advanced biochemistry just to eat lunch.
No. That's a hobby, not survival.
Right. It's literally just understanding the fundamentals. You need 7 to 8 hours of sleep or the brain degrades. Chronic stress elevates cortisol and kills you. Processed sugar is generally bad. And on the finance side, you don't need to be a day trader. You just need to understand the mathematical reality of compounding interest and how to balance a budget.
Exactly. It is the boring basics.
Yeah.
But the return on investment for mastering this basic survival knowledge is astronomical. It keeps you from driving your physical and financial life off a cliff.
Okay, so once you have that locked in, what's next?
You move to category 2, orientation knowledge.
Orientation knowledge. This sounds like the map.
It is the map. This is the knowledge that prevents the world from feeling completely random, chaotic, and terrifying. It's a broad working understanding of human history, basic psychology, fundamental economics, and scientific reasoning.
Let me try an analogy here. It's a difference between looking at the globe versus looking at Google Street View.
I like that.
You don't need to memorize the exact dates of the Peloponnesian War or the exact names of every general in the French Revolution. You just need to understand the repeating patterns of human behavior. You need to know that empires always rise and fall because of overextension. You need to know that incentives drive economies, not magic. You need to know that humans are deeply tribal creatures.
Yes. Because when you have orientation knowledge, you can look at a terrifying news headline today, and instead of having a panic attack, your brain says, I see the pattern here. We are going through a technological revolution, and just like the Industrial Revolution, it is causing temporary social upheaval. It grounds you.
Which gives us the mental space for category 3, practical specialization. I've also heard this called T-shaped knowledge.
T-shaped knowledge is a brilliant mental model. Imagine the letter T. The horizontal bar across the top is that broad, general orientation knowledge we just talked about. You know a little bit about a lot of things.
Right.
But the vertical bar, plunging deep down, is your profound expertise. This is the specific, intense knowledge tied to your craft, your job, or your responsibilities.
This is the part that actually keeps civilization running. We spend all day obsessed with internet influencers, politicians, and talking heads pontificating on podcasts. But the physical reality of human civilization actually relies on the invisible, intense expertise of people doing real work.
Absolutely.
The wastewater treatment operator who understands exactly how to balance the chemicals so a city of 1 million people doesn't die of cholera.
Yes. The pediatric nurse who can spot the subtle signs of sepsis, the master electrician who wires the grid, the logistics manager who routes the shipping containers.
That deep, often boring, unglamorous reliability is the bedrock of society. You need to be deeply, vertically competent in something that contributes to the whole. If everyone is just an armchair quarterback with horizontal knowledge, the house collapses because nobody knows how to fix the plumbing.
Beautifully put. And finally, we reach category 4, meaning knowledge.
What's that?
This is art, music, religion, mythology, culture, philosophy, poetry, and time spent in nature. In our hyper-efficient, hyper-optimized, tech-driven modern world, this category is constantly dismissed as useless, impractical, or a waste of time. How does reading a novel increase my productivity?
But a purely utilitarian life, optimized only for survival, efficiency, and productivity, becomes emotionally sterile very quickly. You become a machine.
Exactly. Meaning knowledge is what makes the survival worth it. Think of music. Music has been described as emotional timekeeping. We need stories, we need ancient myths, we need to stand in the woods and look at a 400-year-old tree and feel small.
It's essential. We need these things to process the tragedy of reality, to connect with other humans, and to make the inherent suffering of life bearable.
So let's connect this directly back to you, the listener. The internet is designed to make you feel like you are failing as a citizen if you don't have a PhD-level understanding of all 4 of these categories simultaneously, while also keeping up with whatever the daily outrage cycle dictates on Twitter.
Which is impossible.
You don't.
Yeah.
You need enough survival knowledge to stay physically alive, enough orientation knowledge to not be manipulated by grifters, deep specialization in your chosen field to contribute to your community, and enough meaning knowledge to keep your soul intact. The rest, the geopolitical trivia, the celebrity gossip, the micro-debates on academic theory, you can practice healthy, intentional ignorance.
Which should feel like an immense psychological relief. You have permission to not know things.
But wait, if those 4 categories are what we should be focusing on, and they make total sense, why do we fail at this so constantly? Why do we spend so much of our finite time on Earth arguing about obscure, meaningless trivia in comment sections? It's a trap we all fall into.
Why do we feel a pit of guilt in our stomach when we admit we don't know the intricate details of the latest political scandal or some hyper-niche sociological theory?
Because of the dark side of knowledge. This is where knowledge mutates. It stops being a tool for navigating life, and it becomes a weapon for identity, dominance, and social performance. We can call this status and moralized knowledge.
Using knowledge as a weapon, how does that actually play out day to day?
It happens when people use obscure cultural references, intense academic jargon, or hyper-specific political awareness, not to educate the person they are talking to, but to signal their own prestige. They are gatekeeping. They're trying to establish dominance in the hierarchy by showing you how much more informed they are.
Oh, I can't believe you haven't read that paper. It's foundational.
Exactly. And it becomes incredibly toxic when it becomes moralized. This is when society starts treating someone's ignorance of a very niche, perhaps newly invented academic theory as a profound moral failing, rather than just a gap in their reading history.
Oh, man, yes.
We treat not knowing the right words as a sin, rather than an opportunity to teach. It creates an environment of constant fear.
It is exhausting. And it leads to this immense psychological burden that I think is unique to our current decade. Before the internet, you only compared your intelligence to the 50 people in your village or your office.
Right, your local pool.
Now, the algorithm exposes you to the top 0.1% intensity of every single human niche simultaneously. You log onto your feed, and within 3 minutes, you see a video of the world's most disciplined bodybuilder, followed by the most radical political activist, followed by a 22-year-old billionaire day trader, followed by a brilliant philosopher.
All in your feed at once.
Essentially screaming at you about how much you don't know and how inadequate you are.
It is unnatural for the human brain to process that level of comparative excellence. It creates infinite, unfinished learning loops. Your brain is suddenly exposed to 1,000 different domains where you feel totally inadequate.
It generates this chronic, buzzing, low-level anxiety, a sense of intellectual insecurity. You feel perpetually behind schedule on a syllabus you never signed up for.
And what happens when humans feel anxious and insecure? They seek a cheap dopamine fix. You start consuming knowledge as an aesthetic.
Oh man, this hits incredibly close to home. Consuming knowledge as a lifestyle aesthetic. Let's talk about the productivity trap.
Let's do it.
How many times have you or me or anyone listening sat on the couch on a Sunday afternoon eating ice cream, binge watching 4 hours of YouTube videos about how to optimize your morning routine or how to build a second brain in Notion?
I feel personally attacked.
Right. You watch video after video, you feel this surge of motivation, you get the dopamine hit of feeling smart and growing, but you haven't actually moved. You haven't changed a single habit in your physical life. You just consumed the vibe of productivity as entertainment.
We treat knowledge as a lifestyle brand. We wear like a designer shirt. But the big sobering insight here is the absolute separation of knowledge and wisdom.
They are not the same thing.
Not at all. We think that absorbing millions of data points, reading 100 newsletters, and scanning headlines every day makes us wise. It doesn't. Being highly informed can actually make you emotionally unstable. It can make you socially fragmented, deeply cynical, and perpetually outraged if you lack the reflection, the silence, and the integration required to turn that raw data into actual wisdom.
Sometimes wisdom is simply knowing what to ignore. It is the discipline of closing the laptop.
It really is.
So let's bring this all together. We have diagnosed a lot today. We've looked at the inevitable bias of human institutions. We've explored the tribalism and vandalism of the internet. We've broken down the exact mathematical hallucinations of AI. And we've exposed the toxicity of using knowledge as a performative weapon.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. But how do we actually walk out our front door tomorrow morning and interact with the world? What is the final framework?
The ultimate methodology for surviving the information age is a combination of two concepts: calibrated provisional trust and epistemic balance.
Calibrated provisional trust. That sounds like an absolute superpower. How do I actually deploy that in my life?
It means we must actively abandon the extremes. We have to abandon the naive 1950s-era trust that says the experts in the white coats are always right and have no blind spots. That is demonstrably false.
Right.
But we also have to abandon the cynical internet-era nihilism that says everyone is corrupt, everything is a lie, trust no one. That is equally false and incredibly destructive. Instead, we trust things provisionally, proportionally, and revisably.
Okay, break those three down for me.
Provisionally means I accept this data or this scientific consensus for now based on the current available evidence, but I know it is a work in progress and it might change.
Okay, so it's a temporary acceptance.
Exactly. Proportionally means my level of confidence matches the quality of the evidence. I trust a multi-decade peer-reviewed global consensus proportionally more than I trust a viral tweet from an anonymous account.
Which is just common sense, but we forget it.
We totally forget it. And most importantly, revisably means I grant myself the permission to update my beliefs when new evidence arrives, without feeling a sense of shame, ego death, or identity collapse.
It is completely taking your ego out of being right. It's decoupling your identity from your current set of facts. This is massive, because for so long we thought the highest virtue of a thinker was to be perfectly unbiased.
But we established an hour ago that being unbiased is biologically and sociologically impossible.
Exactly. The highest intellectual virtue is not neutrality. The highest virtue is correctability.
Correctability, yes.
It is the ability of a university or a machine learning model or a human being to look at the world, notice they are wrong, absorb new information, and update their model of reality. A flawed, biased, but correctable system is infinitely more trustworthy than an independent free thinker who is so attached to their cynical theories that they never, ever admit error.
Correctability over perfection. That is the anchor in the storm.
As we wrap up this deep dive, there is one final, almost mind-bending thought that naturally flows from all of this, and I want to leave you, the listener, with this to chew on.
Go for it.
We've spent this entire time talking about accumulating facts, vetting information, and deciding what goes into your brain. But zoom out and look at the trajectory of artificial intelligence. Think about where we will be in 5 or 10 years. As AI seamlessly takes over the heavy lifting of recalling obscure facts, summarizing dense texts, writing code, and matching patterns, the raw possession of information, just holding data in your head, is going to rapidly lose its social and economic value.
It is going to fundamentally change the definition of what it means to be a smart human.
Exactly. For the last few hundred years, being smart meant you were a walking encyclopedia. You could win at trivia, you could quote the book, you had the answers. In the very near future, that will be completely automated. Intelligence is going to be defined almost entirely by your emotional intelligence, your ethical judgment, your ability to synthesize disparate ideas, and your capacity to verify and build genuine trust with other human beings.
Which is a beautiful shift, if you think about it.
It really is. So I leave you with this question to ponder as you go about your day. What does it mean for your identity and your sense of worth when what you know starts to matter far less than who you are?
A profound and necessary question to end on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep practicing healthy ignorance, keep calibrating your trust, and we'll see you next time.